In the second round of FIDE Grand Prix in Hamburg, the similarities with the previous event in Riga continued. Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, same as in Riga, won his first game against Veselin Topalov with black, making Bulgarian Grandmaster's task close to impossible. In the second game, Topalov never really had a chance and agreed a draw after some simplifications. Alexander Grishuk also has won his match with the black pieces after Navarro overestimated his chances and sacrificed a piece. Grishuk managed to avoid all the traps and forced resignation with direct attack of his own. The match between Jan Krzysztof Duda and Yu Yang-yi, after a fighting draw in Game 1, was decided after a huge mistake by Chinese player in Game 2. Duda had no difficulties finding winning move bishop takes g4 and made his way into the semi-final. Two classical games between Swidler and Dubov finished in a draw more or less after the opening, so those two players had to play the tiebreak for the last spot in the semi-finals. Both longer 25 minutes plus 10-second games went under the same scenario, with Swidler seizing close to a decisive advantage and letting it slip in a time trouble. While in 10 minutes plus 10 seconds games, Dubov proved to be superior, first convincingly winning with black and then getting dominant position with white. Being unable to find a playable move, Peter Swidler agreed a draw, resigning the match. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm glad to welcome you all to the semi-finals of Hamburg Grand Prix. So 4 players left. We are very close to the final stage. In less than a week, we will know the name of the winner of Hamburg Grand Prix. And this semi-final, if we keep in mind who the players are, is actually very, very important for the overall Grand Prix standings. While in the lower bracket, we have Jan Krzysztof Duda and Daniil Dubov, and those two, I'm not sure if it's mathematically impossible, but seems to be so. So those two are very, very unlikely, let's put it this way, to qualify. I still have to do the maths, pardon me. But Maxim Vachier-Lagrave and Alexander Grishuk, the other semi-final, it's clearly two favorites for one of the qualification spots to the candidates. Facing each other, once again, the similarities with the second leg in Riga continues. For Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, it's kind of a remake of the Riga tournament. So he wins at round 1, paired against Topalov in round 2, wins precisely in the same fashion, wins with black and then makes a draw with white. And then in the semi-final, he's facing Grishuk. Once again, he's white in Game 1. So let's see how it goes for him, because now I believe Vachier-Lagrave would, kind of agree that he loses the final as long as he beats Grishuk. That's very, very important. So far, those two, as well as Mamedyarov, who is not playing, and Nepomniachtchi, who got eliminated but will be playing in the last leg. So those 4 players are fighting for 2 qualification spots from the Grand Prix. So in a way, that's a very big match, of course, between Maxim Vachier-Lagrave and Alexander Grishuk. Players getting ready about 1 minute before the start of the games. Once again, we will have a VIP guest to make a first move. This time it's Peter Hintz. I don't know if I pronounced the name correctly, the Corporate Communication Director of Russian Post in Europe. That's what I was told. Seemingly waiting for Mr. Hintz, because the players are already there. So, white for Maxim Vachier-Lagrave and white for Jan Krzysztof Duda against Daniil Dubov. An interesting matchup as well, even though those two are not, as I said, not fighting for the qualification spots. But, well, nevertheless, a very, very interesting matchup. Young, ambitious players. Duda being very successful with the white pieces lately. If you remember his World Cup appearance, he has won a lot of games with the white pieces. Opted to start with 1 c4, and I'm not sure what's happening in the other game. And e4 in Vachier-Lagrave Grishuk, so no surprises there. Might see, same as in Riga, we might see yet another Berlin defense. So with only 2 games, it will be much harder task for me to commentate on those because, well, one typically needs a second host, the second co-caster, so that while the other person is talking, I'd be able to think. So this time, guys, this time around, I don't have such luxury, so bear with me talking nonsense on air with only 2 games running. Once again, a reminder of the pairs today. Vasilia Graf with white against Krysiuk and Jan Krzysztof Duda with white against Daniil Dubov. Once again, before we switch to the actual games view, let's remind everyone about the sponsors of this event, those companies that support chess and made the Grand Prix cycle happen. So it's Fosagra, strategic partner of Grand Prix series, Algorand, official blockchain partner, Pelasieta Shipyard, the partner of Hamburg event, and official cybersecurity partner is Kaspersky. All right, and well, pretty quickly moves are coming, and it's seemingly not the Berlin defense Vasilia Graf and Krysiuk are playing. It is Ruy Lopez. So once again, no early surprises. E4 is kind of a move you expect from Maxime Vasilia Graf. E5 is a typical response from Alexander Krysiuk. So up to this point, they've repeated their game from Riga, A7, A6. It's obviously not a new move, but the last game that I remember, I don't really think those two played any other games since Riga. Trying to recall. Krysiuk is not taking part in the Grand Chess Tour this year, so they couldn't play there. In the World Cup, they didn't face each other. Krysiuk lost to Dingley Ren. Right, so it might be as well their very next game after they played in the match in Riga. And over there, it was the Berlin defense, and Maxime is one of the few players in the world who, well, on the very top, of course, who does go for a so-called Berlin endgame, as well as Alexander Krysiuk himself. So last game was knight to f6, castles, knight e4. They've reached this endgame. I don't quite remember what was happening later on, because already here it's like those tricky moves orders, like some people will prefer h3, some start with giving a check on d1, knight c3, of course, is a legit move. Anyway, it was, well, quite a sharp and entertaining game, despite being an endgame at a very early stage. Finished in a draw, and then Maxime went to win the second game. Okay, so after a7, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles, b5 was played, bishop b3, and, well, bishop b7 would be kind of more standard move for the Ruy Lopez. Bishop c5 is played. Let me catch up with the game just quickly. c3 and d7, d6. So now let's call now Arkhangelsk or Yurtayev variation. Is that the one? So developing the bishop to c5, playing d6, a4 is the move, as far as I remember. I mean, there should be many moves. d4 is possible, of course, to which black is typically replying with bishop to b6. This one has to be like a very well-studied theoretical position. Yeah, guys, yeah, thanks for reminding. There is also the European Club Cup going on starting today. So yeah, and hello chat as well. So I'm monitoring the chat. I remember I wanted to answer something in the chat, like managed to see that people tuning in even before the actual games have started. There was some topic raised in the chat that I wanted to reply to. Don't see it though. Two quick draws in short day predicted by David Barron. I'm not sure about that. We'll see how it goes, but well, could be the case with Maxim Vasyelgrad and Grishuk. However, both had a free day, right? Didn't play the tiebreak. So very logically, they had something prepared and they'll try to, well, obviously Maxim with the white piece will try to play for a win. That's my take on this one. And in the other pair, you have Duda, very aggressive player with the white pieces. I don't really see quick draw happening. Unless, of course, Dubov comes very well prepared and, you know, and just like straight from the start, there'll be some very forcing line with a lot of simplifications in the end. But it's unlikely to happen, it seems. I wish I could switch to the other game, but according to what I have on the digital board, it says 3 moves played, so not, you know, not that much of a game we have so far. Duda opened with c2, c4. And that's it. Where's the clock, people ask? Clock is next to the board. Yeah, well, that's an absolutely precise and non-informative answer. We will be showing the clocks later, of course, but reminder of a time control, 1 hour, 30 minutes for first 40 moves, with 30 seconds increment after each move, with half an hour addition after they complete move 40. So that means there is no need for the clock right now. Players have enough time. I'm asked about my predictions for today. Well, I shouldn't really come up with any sort of predictions in terms of results. I do anticipate a very interesting game in Duda versus Dubov, because, as I said, both are very ambitious, and I'd say that Dubov, well, he's sometimes like too ambitious in a way, like which is very typical. There is such word as whippersnapper, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's like perhaps a colloquial word, but still used. So means no respect whatsoever. And after all, his opponent is another young player, so you know, no one to respect too much. So I expect Dubov to play with. Even with black pieces, to play, well, if not for a win, but to try at least. Any chance, wait a sec, chat never fails to deliver. Any chance we will pronounce Archangel well for us again? Arkhangelsk, that's how the city is called in Russia, and the variation is named after the city, so it has nothing to do with, you know, with the Bible and yeah. So it's Arkhangelsky variation, if you want to be precise. Who's going to play World Chess Championship? It's a fair chance Magnus Carlsen will be involved. For the other player, I'm not sure just yet. The one who wins the candidates. So far, yeah, once again, I mean, since we've got not much to talk about just yet, let's remind ourselves again, who is in the candidates already? Because let's not forget, that's the last qualification event for the candidates going. Candidates are, the candidates tournament is scheduled in spring this year, next year. I don't quite remember if it's March or April, but yeah, coming soon, let's say, so like in 4 months. So far, we have Fabiano Caruana there, obviously the player who participated in the last World Championship match. Then we have Ding Liren and Teimur Rajabov, 2 qualification spots from the World Cup. Then it means, since Ding Liren qualified from the World Cup, that means that he kind of gives his place by rating. Otherwise, he would be qualified by rating, the average rating on 12 last month. he gives his spot to what it looks as of now to Anish Giri. So that means 4 players, and that there is someone else, and there is one Hao who has won the Grand Swiss. So that makes it 5, plus 2 players from the Grand Prix, and those 2 facing each other, Maxime Vachier-Gravel, Alexander Grishuk, are both sort of the favorites. And then there must be someone else. And then here we go. It's a 1 wild card, precisely. Yeah, chat knows. But yeah, thanks, William. I believe you're absolutely correct, but I don't really think something can change for Anish Giri as long as he's like not doing any crazy things, like playing a tournament where he would lose like 50 rating points, because it's an average rating for 12 months. So 12 ratings. Well, you know how the average works. So that means if he's in front right now, then it can't really change. Okay, so finally, a few more moves played in Duda Dubov. So we'll switch to this one over there. No big surprises in the game that we have on the analysis screen. Let me see. So a4, rook to b8, d4, bishop to b6. So far all known. Oh well, that's cool. You'll be the wild card. Are they playing in the dark room? No, not really. But no windows apparently. So, and as far as I remember, there are like two separate plans there. One of them involving trying to capture the b5 pawn after a takes b5, a takes b5, and knight to a3. Where black typically goes for bishop g4, and some positions like or castles first. I mean, it's never too stupid to castle, yeah. Some positions like that are played, and the other one could be then no swap on b5, some sort of bishop e3, and then try to preserve the tension in the center. Giri lost 7 rating points in the European Team Championship, but then once again, it's not his actual rating on whatever months it's going to be, December, but the average starting from January this year. So he's really unlike like 7, those 7 points divided by 12 months, they don't really make such a huge difference. Yeah, precisely. Aronian could be higher rated right now. Yeah, I'm responding to the discussion in the chat. So Aronian might be higher rated, or say in December we could see Mamedyarov being higher rated than Giri. But if we talk of on average rating, then it's very hard to imagine Giri losing his spot. Okay, let's not forget we have the second game going. So Duda against Dubov has started with 1 c4. People say Dubov is tired. Come on, he's a young man. Dubov is a young man. He shouldn't be tired, even though, yeah, you have your point. He's the one who has played the most number of games so far. Both times being involved in the tiebreak. After round 1, it was quite a long one against Rajabov, and then yesterday we've seen dramatic tiebreak against Peter Swidler, where Peter blew away his chances. So English opening this time, e7, e6. After g3, black goes for d5, and that's Taras defense we are talking about. And wow, we have seen Dubov playing Taras defense for a few times. I believe it was played in his match against Shah Mamedyarov, if I'm not mistaken, in Riga Grand Prix round 1. He's played it with black. He has played it in another Grand Prix in Moscow against Hikaru Nakamura. Well, so the mystery revealed how mysterious they, couldn't find the German GM in the city to help Miro. Miro is in Moscow. The studio for English commentary is in Moscow. Therefore, the German GM in Hamburg wouldn't help. So, guys, you have to bear with me. Right. Bishop c5 and knight takes c6 was played. bc6, obviously. Black is getting those so-called hanging pawns, right? Castle short, which might be weak, but for the the modern take of it on it, it does seem to be that those positions are defendable for black. It's like black is unlikely to have any sort of an aggressive push with this pawn structure, since white has the bishop on g2. So with what do we call hanging pawns? Yeah, so this would be, or it was a couple of moves ago, d5 pawn was so-called isolated pawn, so pawn that cannot be supported with the other pawns and is on the open file. After the swap, black has in a way two of such pawns on the open files, and they can't be supported with e pawn or b pawn, right? So therefore, those are called the hanging pawns. Typically, you want to push them forward. So it's not necessarily a good thing or bad thing. It really depends on the position. And with white having the bishop on g2 and being castle short, that's what we have in the game, it's unlikely that black will develop any sort of strong initiative because the king is very well protected on g1, right? Well, let's, just to illustrate, let's imagine white does something else. Just to a little explanation on the structure. I mean, it has nothing to do with the real game, I agree, but you might find it useful. In this case, black, so contrary to the game, the pawn is on e3, the bishop is on e2. In this case, black would actually put the bishop on d6, so that both bishops are pointed towards white's king side. And then black could potentially try to develop some initiative on the king side. With bishop on g2, it's very unlikely to happen. But nevertheless, black's position is absolutely fine, absolutely playable, and it will be hard for white to prove any sort of an advantage. Duda's chance is very small. I believe small chance for the candidates, you mean? As small as I would call it non-existent, to be honest. It's kind of, he has to win the whole thing and pray for like all the other guys to perform extremely badly. Basically, like who are his rivals? Mamedyarov, who's going to play the last tournament, and then Vyshyalovgrad. So he kind of has to win this one and hope for nearly everyone else to lose in the first round of Jerusalem Grand Prix, the last leg, which might be mathematically impossible. I'm not sure what the pairing is. Okay, yeah, people talk about Aronian winning the Grand Chess Tour event. Yeah, got lucky in a way, but it was a nice performance by Levon Aronian, who, by the way, is not doing all that great in the Grand Prix series. Has lost to Jan Nepomniachtchi in Moscow. I don't quite remember what he did in Riga, if he was playing in Riga at all. He was supposed to, I believe, but I don't really remember. So that's weird. So Levon once again proves that he's a very, very strong player, but this time he makes sure he will not play the match against Magnus Carlsen by simply not qualifying to the candidates. So, well, it's a pity, of course, not seeing him in the candidates. It was all in his hands. Speaking of Levon Aronian, if we think of his quarter-final match that was in the World Cup when he had a winning position against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and managed to lose it. That's the tie-break match we are talking about. Okay, so Duda is thinking in this position. That means he's sort of caught by surprise. Not that it's such a fresh position or anything. So typically, White would try to fan chateau his bishop, play b3, bishop to b2, then knight sometimes would go to a4. So ideally, let's say black just does some nonsense moves. Then White puts this knight over there, puts the rook on c1, attacking the c6 pawn, and after, say, rook c8, puts the knight on c5. That's the way Black has to try. White has to try to achieve some sort of an advantage there. So stop the c pawn from advancing, block it on c6, then try to, put the bishop on d4, queen on d2 perhaps, and go from there. Still, even if White achieves all that, which might not be that easy, because honestly I've made like a really silly moves for Black. Rook e8 does make sense, but if you play rook e8 then after bishop b2, of course you have a better move than bishop e6, and this is bishop g4, targeting the e2 pawn, right? Trying to provoke some weaknesses, trying to stop the knight from moving from c3. Yeah. So even if White achieves all that, namely gets the knight on c5, it's still far, the victory for White is still far away from here. So I suggest we actually move back to the other game between Vachier and Grishuk, because that one is much more tense, I would say. There is still an opening discussion in a way. Because over here, there might as well be some precise knowledge required, but the position is not that sharp, let's put it this way. And once again, a lot of stuff in the chat. Pardon me if I'm missing something. Who's eligible for the wild card? That's that's the candidates we are talking again. That's a new system introduced this year. So before that, I believe it was, well, just a nominee of the organizers, and the only requirement was the minimal rating of 27, 25, if I'm not mistaken. But this year they've changed it, and basically it will be a choice. One of those who missed qualification by a tiny margin would be selected as the wild card. So as of now, it is Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, one of the potential wild carders, the guy who has got a third place in the World Cup. Therefore, they had a match for the third place at the World Cup. Then it's surprisingly enough, young Russian star, uprising star Kirill Alexeyenko, the player who has taken the third place in Grand Swiss. Why third and not second? Because the player who has taken second, Fabiano Caruana, is already qualified for the candidates. Then it could be potentially the wild card, one from the top 10 on the average rating. But if you think of it, well, top 10 of the average rating would include Magnus Carlsen over there on the first place, and then Fabiano Caruana, and so on and so forth. And you'll figure out quite quickly that it won't be too many players left, because it's either Magnus, who is not interested in participating in the candidates, or there'll be some players who are already qualified by other means. So the pool from those potential wild cards by rating is really, really limited and might break down to the same players. And there was something else that I wanted to answer. Thoughts on extra points for the classical win, for the Grand Prix, I suppose. That's why we have them. Well, I think it's nice, but once again, I have a lot of ideas how to sort of modernize the system, and none of them perhaps are my own ideas, but it's just like gathering together all those. So it is one of the interesting attempts to motivate players to actually fight in a classical, fight in a classical chess, sort of trying to put more at stake. I'm not sure. Well, I really love the idea of playing the tiebreak before the classical chess, and I was explained in great detail why there is a flaw to this idea. You probably know, guys, that there was a debate that people could play a tiebreak the day before the classical games played, and then the one who wins the tiebreak has a preference if, say, the classical match goes 1-1. So that way you get to see the rapid playoff at the same time. The one who, say, loses the Armageddon game, which is like a blitz game, 5 versus 4 minutes, still has a chance to win the match. So in a way, it does make sense. We'll see. Okay, and then we come to this, conspiracies about a Russian player being the wild carder if the event is held in Russia. Could be, but honestly, as of now, imagine Maxim doesn't qualify from the Grand Prix. I don't really know how you pick anyone over Maxim, who really had a fantastic year once again, and yeah, well, I don't really want to discuss too much on that, but yeah, it does seem to be like last candidates when Kramnik was picked over Maxim Vachill-Graf. That even felt a bit unfair. Never. I mean, I'm not claiming that it's wrong because Kramnik is such a great player, but Vachill-Graf back then, previous cycle, he missed it like from 3 different angles. He was very close to qualify by rating. He has lost the winning semi-final against Aronian in the World Cup, so was like few moves away from qualification. And then he had a shot at it in the Grand Prix as well. So I was thinking it'd be fair, it'd be fair to give a wild card to Maxim. Well, Duda, however, has played bishop to g5 and not b3, bishop b2 thing. I'm wondering what his plan is if black plays simple move h7, h6. Because, I mean, parting with this bishop, unless white has this tactic, I don't know if it can work. But unless white has this tactic, we'll check it later. I mean, this in a static way, like if you don't have knight d5, that's like a very good position for black. I don't see any problem for black over there. So it's kind of, if you went for bishop g5, that means you're supposed to capture on f6 very next move, in case of h6, of course, and then try to go for that, where you capture on d5 twice, and then the c5 bishop, as well as a8 rook, are hanging. Well, it might be something. Now that I'm looking at it, it might be something. Because I don't really see the way for black to, to keep the material, and I don't really see black equalizing easily over there. Might as well be good enough, despite white being a pawn up, might be good enough, because one of the reasons being that e3 is really, really awkward. Not only rook f2 is there, right, and then the a1 rook is hanging, but there is also bishop a6. But yeah, since I've discovered this knight takes d5 idea, maybe, yeah, wait a sec, after bishop g5, maybe black has to be a little bit more careful about it and play a move like rook to b8 first. Yeah, knight d5 seems to work indeed. Is this a classical rapid game? It is a classical game. Okay, and I'm reminded there is one more game going. So once again, let's go back to Vuccia and Grishuk. I've actually announced this quite some time ago, but never happened. So, after bishop b6, remember that I said a b5, knight a3 is a valid attempt. So that's precisely what has happened. Castles, knight takes b5, bishop to g4, bishop e3. E takes d4, and it would seem Maxim is thinking right here, which is a bit surprising because c takes d4 used to be the move. Okay. Would be nice to have a camera on the other game, yeah, because the position we have is not from Duda Dubov. That's Vasilyograph against Grishuk once again, and I'm wondering if it's either my digital board got stuck, it happens from time to time, or indeed Maxim has spotted some alternative to c takes d4, which is like a typical recapture. Well, maybe have to mention this if there are like some people who are not very familiar with this line. Knight takes e4 seems to win the pawn back, but not really. That's a very similar thing can happen in many lines of the Ruy Lopez, that this is a poisonous pawn because black has no means of guarding both knights at the same time. Oh no, so Vasilyograph in fact has taken the pawn on d4 with his c-pawn. Over there, is knight e4 actually a legit move? I don't really think it is played typically in this position. Feeling is that they do something else, but knight e4, bishop to d5, queen e8, queen to c2, and yeah, knight e4 was played. Oh well, knight e4 is the main move. Oh, thanks. So knight e4 is the main move. Wait a sec, knight b4, is it? There is one line where something like that happens. So they do this. Queen e4. Wait. Bishop d5, I suspect, needs to be tried, right? And guys, I'm not getting this. What's the discussion? There was something on 95% up. Those players getting best moves on 95% of the time. Yeah, I'm amazed with you guys on YouTube who are still complaining about the grandmasters not finding the best moves. And indeed, the guys, they are kind of matching computer's best choice 95% of the time, and you guys are still not happy. How come is that? So 94. Bishop d5. Let's try to figure out what on earth is going here. It has to be a theory, right? Queen to e8. I don't really see any other move. And then white goes for queen c2. And then what does black do in this case? got to be knight b5, right? Then he captures over there. There are some ways to win the piece back, it would seem. Like what? Knight d5. Does knight d5 work? Knight d5. Point being, if queen g4, black actually gets to take on b5. Material equal, black gets a very nice knight on d5. Oh, wait, maybe had to take on e3 first. This might be very, very important, because this way black can't protect g7 properly and about to lose an exchange, yeah? So after queen g4, knight e3 first, of course. So well, white has to capture, and then black takes on b5. And the other option would be to capture the knight, after which black seemingly can take on f3 first, and if white is eager to keep the knight on b5 protected, he has to take with the g pawn, and then there is c7, c6, where something like this can happen. For instance, knight captures on d6, knight captures on e8. White is a pawn up, but all of his pawns are weak, and I believe black has to have sufficient counterplay. Well, one of the ways being regrouping the bishop to f6, then applying the pressure on the b2 pawn as well as the d4 pawn. Well, bishop f3 first, then knight b4. Well, I wasn't sure. Let's find out together. So, bishop to e4. No, sorry, bishop to d5, queen e8, queen c2. Not c1, but c2. Over there, bishop f3, I thought was problematic because of this, unless I'm missing some tactic, which is always an option. Yeah, but bishop was hanging on c6. So I'm guessing knight b4 and then knight d5. That has to be the line. So bishop d5. Yeah, well, we've provided some very long line, which was bishop d5, queen e8, and h3. Knight back to f6. Does it all make sense? Is it like some line from a game or something? Huh. Okay, fair point, but well, about chess players. Yeah, I do like the question a lot about chess players being like celebrities to make chess more popular. However, I'm not sure I'm in a position to discuss it right now, but fair enough, yeah. Something like that should be done, if you ask me. Anything else? Well, I don't know how it correlates with the current position in the game, but the thing you, Chad, mentioned about two knights versus a pawn, most people have heard of two knights winning versus the pawn, but most GMs can't actually win it. I wouldn't go that far and say that most GMs can't win it. But it is a tough thing. Okay, not always, but sometimes. I mean, it depends on where the pawn is. Yeah, some positions are just a draw, and then even if the pawn is blocked on a proper square on so-called Troitsky line, which I've never bothered to learn. I mean, where the pawn has to be blocked. Once again, it's the question raised in the chat. We are discussing two knights versus a pawn ending, which has nothing to do with the position on the board. The position on the board is such: the pawn on e4 had been taken, and Vishyalagraph is thinking right here. So a moment of kind of a pause in both games. Duda versus Dubov, Bishop G5, the last game we've seen. The last position we've seen. No moves played since. And over here after knight e4, what happens if, say, if white for some reason has no interest in kind of trying to punish black immediately, but does some sort of h3? Does he actually have some sort of an advantage in this case? So honestly, I don't see a reason why black is not able to play bishop h5. I mean, you could probably trade. I mean, if for some reason bishop h5 would be the first move I'd be looking at. But if for some reason it's not possible to play, then even bishop f3 followed by d5 shouldn't be all that terrible for black. Because, you know, the knight on e4 is not bad. d4 pawn might be weak at times. Might be weak at times for white. And then, if anything, this knight can be moved to e7, then the d5 supported, the d5 pawn supported with c7, c6. Thing-wise, it has to be fine. So one of those lines where white has to be extremely principled, let's say. So Maxim better prove that he has something after bishop d5, because like quiet moves, common sense moves would not really take you anywhere. So h2, h3, queen c2 or bishop d5. Is queen c2 any different from bishop d5? What do you guys think? Because queen c2 does force black to play queen e8, right? Does force black... nah, that's nonsense. Queen e8, guarding both knights once again. And then what else white can do apart from that? No, I mean, it's either bishop d5 or queen c2, which would more or less lead to the same, it seems. Yeah, right. I believe you guys discussed the potential chances of the players in terms of qualification for the candidates. Yeah, I do have. I did have. Did the math before this tournament. It was Grishuk followed by Vyshyalovgraf and Nepomniachtchi, but then again, Jan Nepomniachtchi got eliminated in round 1, so he keeps his score after winning Moscow and not playing in Riga. For Grishuk, the problem is that's his last event. So if, say, well, they can't really finish on the way the bracket works, they can't finish on the same score with Maxim Vyshyalovgraf, Grishuk and Lagraf, because they're playing in the semi-final, and the one who goes to the final obviously gets more points. But imagine it be Grishuk. So he gets, say, extra 3 points, goes to the final but loses to either Dubov or Jan Krzysztof Duda. Might sound confusing. Vyshyalovgraf has one more shot at it, because he will be playing the last event, while for Grishuk it is the last event. So in a way, if Grishuk wins, Maxim still has his chances. If Maxim wins, for Grishuk it's more or less game over, unless all three all 2 other contenders. So once again, we have, as of now, 4 players seemingly fighting for 2 qualification spots. It's Grishuk and Lagraf, and 2 who are absent in this tournament, Jan Nepomniachtchi and Shahryar Mamedyarov. Jan has already lost over there. Mamedyarov was not playing there. So if Grishuk loses and finishes his Grand Prix participation, that for him, in order to qualify, it has to be both Mamedyarov and Nepomniachtchi doing extremely bad in December in Jerusalem. Yeah, queen c2 followed by bishop d5 or vice versa. That's the moves we are expecting from Maxim Vishilov graph, and so far, once again, let's repeat it, that's what we've able to figure out. Bishop d5 attacking both knights, queen to e8 guarding both knights, queen c2 attacking both knights again, and seemingly knight b4 has to be preferred over bishop f3, which was suggested in the chat. Knight b4, queen e4. Now that I'm thinking, why didn't I capture the knight on b5? Because, yeah, it does make sense. So if black starts by capturing the knight on d5, there is queen g4, and we are transposed to the other line, which was not working for black, because if knight takes, and I don't see queen takes being any different, there is bishop h6, and white wins in exchange. So that's being said, well, you do have the other moves order. You can capture on f3 first, and now if white takes with the pawn for some mysterious reason, then you can capture the knight over there. White has a pair of bishops, but all of his pawn setup destroyed. I believe black does more than fine here. After bishop f3, however, there is queen takes on e8. Anything you take on e8 with, white captures on f3 and he is up a piece. Well, is it for real, Europeshek? Wild card for the candidates will be determined as follows. That's surprising. So, as you can see, guys, I'm not the most informed person to speculate about the wild card on the candidates. Little do I know. It already seems to be determined. Okay, so it brings us back to the situation that in this case black has to capture on d5. Once again, the point being that after queen g4 he has to play an intermediate move knight e3, so that after f e3 queen b5 equal material and no threats similarly to black's king. And now we are about to figure out what black is planning to do after h3. So after knight a5, after queen c2, it turns out that knight a5 is the main move. Okay, why is that? I'm still somewhat puzzled. I mean, what's the difference in this case? Could it be some tactical nonsense like that? Could be, because those pieces are loose, and maybe black loses one of those guys. So I was informed in the chat that after queen c2, in fact, it's not queen e8 but knight a5. Yeah, fair enough. h3 is the move that was suggested in the chat as one of the options for white, and it was played. So we'll see what Grishuk is planning, how Grishuk is planning to react to h3. One of my guesses was that even bishop takes f3 shouldn't be that bad. Bishop takes f3 shouldn't be that bad, but as long as I don't see anything bad after bishop h5, I'm inclined to try to play this move with black. Wildcard for Giri? Yeah, precisely. You're getting answered in the chats that Giri is almost guaranteed to get the rating spot, so it's very unlikely he'll get the wildcard. And I'm still puzzled by the other game. And I would really love to see the camera view on Duda and Dubov, because it does seem to be that Dubov is thinking after his move 11. That's Alexander Grishuk, not to be confused with Dubov. But yeah, that's the information I have so far, that in Duda Dubov, once again, not this game, but the other game, after bishop g5, there was no move from Daniil, which is somewhat surprising, because, as I said, perhaps more standard would be b3 and bishop b2, knight a4, this kind of setup. But after bishop g5, one has to know something. One has to know something, nevertheless. Yes, indeed, it's Daniil Dubov thinking after bishop g5. Well, and people in the chat discuss, well, a lot of stuff, yeah. Brilliant point about the other game. So we'll go back to the other games, because here, really, Dubov is not has not made a move just yet. Once again, the most natural. So for those who might be joining lately, the most natural reply, h7, h6, kind of trying to clarify White's intentions, doesn't seem to work, because trade on f6 and knight d5. So that after c takes, queen takes, both the rook and the bishop are hanging. Now that we've reached this position, I'm thinking how bad would be to try to take on b2. So black has a weakness on c6, but a pair of bishops in return. But still, you probably don't want to enter such territory as long as you have safer moves, which might be bishop e6 or rook b8 possibly. Yeah, I was thinking rook b8 shouldn't be bad. Okay, so let's leave Daniil Dubov thinking. Let's go back to Vasilev Graven-Grishuk, because I'm getting educated by chat on what's the difference after h3. So h2, h3 played, and then if bishop goes to h5, then if I got it right, this line no longer works for black. Queen to e8, queen to c2, once again attacking both horses. After knight to b5, queen takes e4. Oh, wait a sec, why doesn't it work? Black can still take, it seems, and then take on f3. No, this does seem to, well, looks like it works to me. So if g takes, c7, c6, you have kind of a set of positions for white, where white is a pawn up. Like queen d6, c takes b5, white's pawn up. But with all those being weak, I'm not sure how real white's chances for success would be. Well, maybe that's the better version, because I was only looking, once again, without the inclusion of h3, so with white pawn on h2, right? I was only looking at knight d6, which seems to be like fairly balanced endgame, with d pawn being weak, b2 pawn being weak, so white's extra pawn doesn't make such a lot of difference. Well, thanks. The point is that bishop f3 instead of knight b4 was great before, and now it's not. I don't quite understand. Well, once again, it's for the second time that I see people mention bishop f3 in a chat. Well, mystery revealed. Indeed, yeah. So I was stopping just like one move too early after bishop c6. And perhaps you are right, guys, because now I'm spotting this tactic. So it's queen e6, and if white captures over there, because otherwise white is not a piece up, right? If white captures on f3, it's queen g6 check, and after king h1, there is this trick, knight g3, and then queen takes queen. While with the inclusion of h3 and bishop h5, this thingy is no longer available. Bishop c6, queen e6, takes on f3, queen g6, and guess what? It's king h2, so no check, no discovered attack with this knight. Makes perfect sense. But yeah, so bishop f3 is not possible, but black still has knight b4 in this case. So Grishuk is thinking, let's see if he ends up playing some sort of bishop f3. Well, by the way, bishop f3 is one thing. How bad is to guard one of the knights right here, to go back to d7? So the material's equal. Pawn structure, if you think of it this way, might even be kind of slightly favorable for black, right? Technically having less pawn islands. Pretty much similar. Let's not go too far over there. So it's other some tactical stuff right here, which having difficulties spotting, to be honest. I mean, what could be the tactic which all of a sudden works for white? All black is just fine. And once again, coming back to the previous line, queen takes b5 instead of knight takes d5. Let's check this one once. No, that's nonsense. Yeah, takes. Let's check this one once again, because I came to the conclusion, perhaps to a wrong conclusion, that knight d5 was more precise. Queen takes here. Yeah, you're right. Now you can take on b5 because the bishop on g4 is no longer hanging. So this h3 inclusion kind of changes a lot of stuff. Yeah, well, in this very case, I agree with you. Black seems to be more than fine. Don't really know what white's supposed to do here. Yeah, the bishop's hanging and bishop g6 will be played. Yeah, that seems to be a very good position. So bishop h5 seems to be possible, right? Well, evergreen discussion on Judith Polgar in particular, and woman in general, playing with men and becoming the world champion. Anything new? Not really. I don't know if you want an opinion, but I've got one for you. So really, this sample size, like out of when we started the chess club, we have like one girl, maybe the ratio is 1 to 10 at best, right? So one girl playing and then 10 boys would be playing. So perhaps because of that, so, and Judith, of course, is an example of yeah. I mean, there is no gender discrimination. There is no difference, right? So I don't really think it's impossible. It's that nowadays we don't have anyone remotely as close as Judith was, as Judith was to top 10 or something. Well, Hu Yifan, at some point, it did look like she would be. She actually played in one of the Grand Prix, it seems. Yeah, the Grand Prix cycle. Hu Yifan did play, I believe. The last one. Yeah, but since then she kind of entered the university, and I'm no longer sure about her plans of, fighting for the world chess crown. Okay, so Krishuk is thinking after h2, h3, and with Krishuk, you're never sure, I mean, how long he knows the opening theory in the position when he might be spending half an hour. It might still be that next 10 moves are, are in the book. And a couple of moves more were played in Duda and Dubov, well, in the game between Duda and Dubov. But yeah, we will look at those moves after a very quick, very brief break with sponsors ads, and I'll be back right after. So welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the semi-finals of Hamburg Grand Prix. And as I promised, let's go to the second semi-final. We mostly concentrate on Vasilev and Grishuk, but let's revisit the game between Duda and Dubov, because something has happened, something that I do not fully comprehend, to be honest. So after quite a lot of time was spent by Daniil Dubov, he ended up playing h7, h6, which we thought was not a great idea because of bishop f6, queen f6, and knight d5. But it turns out Duda swapped the bishop for the knight on f6, but didn't take on d5. So, guys in the chat, if you do have, and I believe you do have, an access to an engine, could you please provide me with an answer if knight d5 was or wasn't a good idea? Because the move Duda ended up playing, which was rook c1, and the response to this was bishop to b6, I still believe what I said about this position holds true. So if there is, or there was, move before, no direct way for white to put the pressure, then black with two bishops has to be absolutely fine here. So I'm really wondering, so this line, yeah, I got it, thanks very much. So indeed, knight d5 would have been answered with queen b2. And it was working. Well, perhaps, yeah. So I was mildly worried about this, rook b1, then threatening knight c7 to trap the knight. But it seems queen e5 works just fine, yeah? And then, yeah, the c6 pawn is somewhat weak in this case, like after knight f4, but apparently two bishops are sufficient compensation for that. Okay, so rook c1 and bishop b6 played. Now I'm wondering how white is planning to continue, because one of the kind of a typical ideas for this structure, with black pawns being on c6, d5, in terms of pawn pushes, would be to play to e4 in the moment where black can't play d4 and has to take. But I can hardly imagine this happening in our game. So for this, it would be if, say, white instead of bishop g5, once again, if we look at my moves, like bishop b2, b3, and then put the bishop on b2, gets his knight on c5 later, and somewhere around this point, I can imagine white playing into e4, then breaking black's central formation. But not the way it is in the game. Because e4, it's almost always d4, right? White still has the plan to put the knight on c5, you're right. But it's kind of harder to achieve now, right? Because there's always going to be something hanging, the e3 pawn or the b2, well, e2 pawn or the b2 pawn. So I do agree that if you achieve that and you kind of in time to play e3 and then support the knight with b4, but even then, I'm not sure if white is getting anywhere against the two bishops. After e4, d takes is -1. Yeah, could be. It's just that I'm not, once again, I'm not claiming that e4 could be considered a move in this position at all. Yes, you're absolutely right, because f2 is weak, and the other thing is that white doesn't have a comfortable way of recapturing on e4, I'm afraid, right? There is bishop a6 if bishop e4, and there is queen b2 if knight e4. So yes, well, doesn't make sense to open the position with two bishops for your opponent. Therefore, not e4, but e3 was played. I just wanted to point out that that's kind of a standard play for white in terms of the pawn pushes. So basically, you access the structure by thinking, I mean, what's my plan? And typically the plan, it's not like, not where you put the pieces, but what pawn you are moving, how do you potentially change the pawn structure. E2, E3 was played instead. E3 was played instead, yes, stopping any kind of D5, D4 nonsense. And yes, knight A4 followed by B4, maybe followed by knight to C5 is something for white to consider. So now black has to decide what to do with the C8 bishop, right? Because there is a move with a tempo, for instance. There is a move bishop to A6, targeting the rook. If rook goes, then white has to care, at times, has to care about D5, D4, and he won't be able to trade comfortably because F2 will be hanging. I would think that some position like that, so you just put the rook on D8, should be playable for black. In case of queen A4, yes, this bishop is not looking all that impressive just yet. But you put it on B7, later on you might consider going C5, D4, or just D4 at once. Two bishops looks really great, but white's rooks are active. Well, we'll see. So once again, E3 played so far. Bishop, well, I believe it was answered. Yeah, bishop E6 in rook E1. That's the current position. I'm wondering if he can just like play D4 immediately, because say this is not something black would be worried about. Even if he loses the C6 pawn, I don't really think, I mean, with such a monster on D4, I'm not really worried about black's position. Let's say he goes rook B8. I might have to worry a bit, because after B3, I was thinking of rook C8, but then white has knight D5 and threatens knight E7. So maybe I should be a bit more careful with my pawns for black now in this position. To bishop A6, rook E1. Yeah, then some sort of put rooks in the center thing, like rook A to D8 or rook F to E8 first, right? You might be right, guys, in the chat. It might be that position looks optically very pleasant for black, but if none of those like immediate active moves work, then in the long run it might be white who actually has some edge here. Once again, if white reaches some position like knight A4, knight C5, might prove to be unpleasant for black. If you're wondering about the other semi-final, nothing goes on. It seems Grishuk is still thinking after H2, H3. Well, was it a question to me about what makes chess more enjoyable for me personally than other mind games like poker, Go, Mahjong? I don't playing in Mahjong, to be honest. Go is an enjoyable game, but too complex to my taste. I mean, it's like I hate playing board games or whatever games badly, and I'm really bad at Go. I mean, that's my problem. So, and then a discussion about this position. Is the position completely equal? I suspect the engine would claim it to be completely equal. So once again, it really depends. I would say that black has to have the dynamical factors at his side. So if say if black manages to break through in the center with d4, he should be fine. If, let's say, white somehow is able to drag the game on, and once again, it would involve perhaps knight a4, knight c5, then I would be leaning towards white's advantage in this. Right? So yeah, what makes chess more, or how was it phrased? I don't quite remember. More enjoyable. Hard to say. Is it really like more enjoyable? It's like it's the only game I'm sort of not bad at. Maybe that's why I prefer. Well, less of so-called RNG, right? Less of. So it's kind of you get this perhaps somewhat false feeling that you control what you are doing before you actually play a blitz game and understand you can mess up any kind of winning position. You do have the feeling that yeah, you control the flow of the game, and unlike, say, in poker, where you can have brilliant odds and still lose in this particular, hand because of like bad beat or something. White should have kept dark square bishop for real chances. That's what I thought, David. But well, let's see, because Duda might have a different opinion on that. I do suspect that after rook a d8, though, black is serious about playing d5, d4. Could be very next move. It's like if white does something flow, it's just that I don't really see how to provide you guys with the example. Like b4, for instance. I don't know if b4 does look any attractive, but imagine white plays b4, and then there is this d4. And white might find himself in a bit of a trouble, because by no means you want to take over here, right? Because then after bishop d4 seems to be like too many threats. f2 being a threat, the knight on c3 hanging. Oh, queen f3 is still there though. Yeah, and if white tries knight e4 with the tempo, hoping for queen, well, actually queen g6 is also possible. I thought queen e7 would be better, but queen g6 is also possible. Because in this line, rook c6, queen c6, there is no discovered attack on the queen, because queen captures on f6 itself, right? So this doesn't make sense for white. But I don't think b4 would be played, right? And Duda already did something else. Moving perhaps his queen somewhere? I don't really see what was the last move Duda has played. Queen d1 to c2. Okay, fair enough. So intending perhaps to play knight a4 if given a chance to, to try to swap the bishop, but at the same time attack the pawn on c6. So one more time, can we try this? d4, suspect he takes, bishop takes. And this kind of positions, I've honestly never properly understood when is this line where black's initiative is like worth more than his weaknesses. So it never seems, unless white kind of loses some material immediately, it never seems to be better for black, this kind of positions, because of like c-pawn being weak and so on. But at the same time, to imagine white succeeding in like winning one of the pawns and then converting it, not really, because the bishops are really like a powerhouse, and the bishop d3 being very often the motif black is looking for. Bishop d3, then if queen takes, bishop f2. So d4 is considerable, and if not, Dubov might have to play. Well, I don't know what, for instance, what Rook F to E8 does. Does it actually help Black, or it might as well be that in, say, in a potential line, the A3, once again, A3 is nonsense, just to illustrate. In the potential line where Black goes D4, it will actually help White, because after ED4, a pair of rooks will be traded on the E file. So I'm not very keen on playing Rook F8 to E8 if I still have D5, D4 ideas with Black. Would really love to see the continuation of Vasiello, Graf and Grishuk, but no moves just yet. H2, H3 being the last move in this game, move 15. Well, let's switch the camera view nevertheless. Maybe we can figure out how much time Grishuk has spent. I believe before that, till move 15, yeah, that's the current position. Before that, no, that's the other game we are shown. What's going on there? 45 minutes for Dubov and 1 hour 11 for Duda, if I see it correctly. Yeah, but I was talking about the other game, Vasiello, Graf and Grishuk. Let's visit this one. Let's see how much time Grishuk has left, because he seemingly is thinking for half an hour already after this H3 happened. Let's wait till we get the camera view on that one. Yeah, we'll check the chat once again if there is anything new. Well, that's something I wanted to talk about. This 000 as the computer evaluation in Duda versus Dubov. That's why I do like those good old evaluations, which are not the numbers, but not the numbers, but the symbols. And then there was a specific symbol which would be unclear position. So that position, let's go back. Since Dubov has played the move and the move was D4, let's go back and see what's going to happen. It's in unclear position. So something that you would evaluate as absolutely equal. It's a rook endgame with 3 pawns each, on the king side, 1 pawn each on the queen side, with pieces being relatively equally good or equally badly placed. While over there, well, it's obviously helpful to know that engine doesn't think that your position is bad, but does it really help you in terms of what plan to, what plan to implement over there and what to do? So in a way, it was, yeah. I don't necessarily agree with you guys that a symbol evaluation is the best. It's just like that's the way the players from older generation were taught, and me included, right? So that's what I'm used to. Yeah, after d4, ed4, yeah, what about queen d4? Well, why not? Might be even better, because now knight e4 is not coming with a tempo. Yeah, overall, perhaps we should try to answer this question. What happens if white is greedy and he takes the pawn on c6? Could this be any problematic? And perhaps the answer is no, right? Because what we do is this, I suspect. We go there, we target the f2 pawn with the bishop. After knight e4, well, I thought we would trade, go to d3, make sure the rook has to leave the second rank. And after, say, I don't know where the rook is going, perhaps to c1, and then we trade over there, bishop takes, we put the rook on d2, and more or less can agree a draw right here. Because both f2 and both f2 and b2 are hanging. And rook c2, well, just for, for fun's sake, rook c2 doesn't protect the f2 pawn because there've been some blunders like that. There've been some examples of grandmasters blundering like that because you think rook c2 kind of guards both pawns, and yes, if black would start capturing with the rook, but bishop f2, and of course you cannot take with the king because the bishop is still protected. So rook c2 doesn't guard the pawns. You have to play an ugly move, rook f1, after which black captures, and we might as well get a symmetrical position after a few more moves. Okay. So queen d4 might be the move. So far, no move from Duda. So it could be that he's considering knight e4, right? Could be that he's considering knight e4. But then I'm wondering what Dubo's reaction is here. Queen e7 seems to be possible. Well, basically that's the way white can hope to win the pawn. Yeah. In case of queen e7, white captures on d4, and after bishop takes, can try to capture on c6. Once again, interestingly, no discovered attacks. It seems no discovered attacks that would be beneficial for white. But white can try to take on c6. But even so, after bishop b7, and it could be, guys, that even a position like that, don't know what white is supposed to capture with, say with the rook. Even like that, I'm not sure how serious, as long as the queens are on the board especially, I'm not sure how serious white's chances of converting this extra pawn are, because f2 will constantly be a problem. Queen g6, yeah, queen g6 is, of course, another option after knight e4. I was about to mention it after queen e7. Yeah, queen g6, I don't see what's wrong with queen g6 either. But then what do we do if white kind of does the same? So takes on d4 is required. Is it ever not recapturing on d4 immediately for some reason? No, you're absolutely right. That's the better way to do it. You just take here, after queen c6, you trade, and you perhaps attack the rook, right? No, wait. You attack the rook right here. And then if rook c2, you attack the rook again. Does it work? Or not really? Rook d2 in this case. Yeah, I wanted to say that it's kind of move the bishop with a tempo, and at the end of the light capture the pawn on b2, but it doesn't seem to be possible. So yeah, knight to e4, queen to g6, and then what? Takes over here. Bishop pair is dangerous for white because any inaccurate move by white and he will lose. Not sure, to be honest, in this particular case. White's king is, once again, white's king is very, very safe thanks to this g2 bishop. So black, in a way, also has to be precise not to end up, not getting full compensation for the pawn. And maybe, once again, maybe my idea of capturing d4 with the bishop is just purely wrong. Maybe black has to take with the rook, so that if this happens, once again, black seemingly has a chance to trade everything and try to get to second rank. This, for a change, might be the situation where it actually works. Like even f5 followed by rook d2 might be an issue. Well, once again, I love those discussions in the chat. Who was the greatest world champion of all times? Because, guys, let's be honest. It's so tough to compare. And why nobody mentions? Yeah. So honestly, once again, I don't know if you want my theory, but I'll give it anyway. So if you think of like comparing those, like, let's take a great player from the past and let him fight, okay, I don't know, the time machine, whatever, and let him fight against the modern world champion. And people tend to say, oh, well, Capablanca and natural talent would be one of the prominent players. No, the understanding of the game, the knowledge about the game evolves with every new generation. So I don't really think the great players of the past would stand a chance. Like Robert James Fischer, with all the respect, how great of a player he was, I don't really think he would stand a chance against Garry Kasparov, and not to mention the current world champion. Yeah, and then we can go further on this discussion. Like, let's take, once again, Capablanca and give him the computer and teach him all the modern theory. But this is like pushing it too far. So we might as well try to go back to the position. So knight to e4 was played. And nobody seemingly got the move right, because d4, knight e4, and queen to f5. So that's what Dubov decided to do. E takes d4, rook takes d4. So he preferred the queen on f5 and not on g6. So that in case of queen takes c6, he doesn't have to trade the queens. Doesn't have to trade the queens, but what does he do in case of queen c6? I do feel like there should be some tactical solution, but honestly, I'm not seeing it right away. It's like rook e4, but then bishop takes, and you probably do have some compensation after queen f2, queen b2, but that's not what we are looking for, right? We are looking for some way for black to kind of refute the whole thing. Is rook c8 a move? Oh, then, okay, guys, then mystery revealed, because rook c8 kind of traps the queen, and therefore that's perhaps the answer. You simply can't take on c6, it seems. Is there any square for the queen? Not really, right? So yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. So c6 is simply indirectly protected, it seems. Yeah, rook c8 at the end of the line, but perhaps like that's precisely the end of the line. Queen c6, rook c8, right? Who's winning in Jan's game? Nobody's winning just yet, I believe. It does seem to be, at the very least, equal from black's perspective. I do believe, since the c6 pawn is not hanging, since the center gets opened, well, particularly this diagonal is very important, the diagonal for the bishop from b6, I do believe that it shouldn't be any problematic for Daniil Dubov. But at the same time, for instance, now it's white to move. So if white goes for knight c5, how serious black's options to play for win are. It's like you'd have to trade, it seems. I'm far less optimistic for black since I found this knight c5. Yeah, precisely. And the move that was mentioned in the chat. If it was, I thought, I don't want to look at it, but if it was mentioned in the chat, let's find what's going to happen after knight d6. Because Yeah, I thought it's too simple, and I would not mention this. But since it was mentioned in the chat that there is second move knight d6, it does seem to fall into a very nice trap because queen f2 is a check. Now, if you don't capture the queen, black's gonna take on c6 and win the game, yeah. And then if the king takes, this seems to be a checkmate in one to me, and it is. So Duda, of course, is not that naive to capture this dude on c6. I believe he's going to play. He's going to play knight c5 or something, trying to simplify the game. And yeah, and if you want to simplify, you probably go knight c5. Just yeah, okay. So in this case, black will have to trade. The bishop on a6 is hanging. Exchanging on c5 doesn't look that appealing, right? So it might not be terrible, but black certainly is fighting for a draw after this one. So I'm guessing some try like this has to be black's choice. Like rook c4, once again, tactically trying to solve the problem where white seemingly has to trade. Then knight d7. I mean, some like kind of long forcing line with an absolutely equal position in the end. b3, bishop e6. Well, actually, this might not be equal. b3 is a like lousy move from positional standpoint, so you probably play a3 instead. Or just if you are fine with a draw, you might as well go rook c1 over here. And bishop a2, rook c6, and that's all she wrote. Yeah. Oh, bishop c8, you suggest. Bishop c8 after knight c... No, it's not possible, right? The queen's hanging. Or do you really mean bishop c8 without a trade? Could be, I mean. Knight c5 is on the board, so we are about to find out. We are about to find out. Yeah, that's a need. A lot of people in the chat has spotted queen takes f2 after knight d6 in a little joke line. And yeah, the discussion goes on about, once again, great players of the past being put in the modern tournaments and perhaps before trained with, kind of fed the opening database and trained with the engines. Tough to discuss, of course. We finally seemingly getting some moves in the other game. So let's switch to no, we won't, because this game is going. So queen c2, rook c2. I'm keen to see Dubov's very next move. Will it be rook c4? Will it be... maybe this is the position you were talking about, bishop c8, guys. Well, you could do this. It's like to go to c8, and then in case of bishop c6, there should be some tactic, right? I suspect that's what you mean. Say bishop f5 over there. But, you know, in this kind of endgame, even if black doesn't win something immediately, he shouldn't be terribly lost because of, once again, the power of two bishops. Dubov plays another move, not rook c4, not bishop to c8, obviously not capturing the knight. He goes for bishop c4. So that the knight on d7 is hanging. Sorry, the knight on c5 is hanging, pardon me. d7, that was knight d7 after rook c4 in the rook trade. And here, after bishop c4, you seemingly can't play knight d7. Smells like a draw. Well, depends on what white's next move is. Because b3 more or less seals the deal, right? Black will have to capture the horse, rook c4, that's it. Bishop d5 kind of drags the game on, but I'm not sure if it's black who is supposed to be better in this case, because this bishop, as long as the knight stands on c5, I don't really think this bishop is such a powerhouse. So yeah, in case of b3, black might as well just take, and that's more or less a draw, right? What's c3? I don't know, that's something else, I suppose, right? c3, b3, you mean, right? Because otherwise, not clear what white is supposed to be doing. Seemingly no way to fight for advantage for white, so therefore you just play b3 and call it a day. Well, I don't know how relevant and how important it is, but let's take a glance at this one. White plays knight b3. Yeah, and the move is mentioned in the chat. Black seemingly doesn't have anything better but to take a b3, and now the c6 pawn is hanging, right? But what I want to say that this perhaps is the position where you don't really care about the c6 pawn. Because if you put it to c5, you kind of really limit your own bishop. And then, if you play a couple of more of those stupid moves, so that white gets the bishop on c4, and now he is the one who attacks the weakness, might all of a sudden, change the evaluation. It's still not a problematic position for black, but it clearly shifted in white's favor. So if this happens on the board, this knight b3, bishop b3, a b3, you don't really care about the c6 pawn. Even if white takes, those two double pawns, they are nothing, yeah? I mean, they are not creating a passed pawn or something. So over there, black just plays rook d8 and opts for rook d2, and that'll be it. Plus 0.26 for Duda. In which line I want to ask, because I suspect computer would give this position, say, being better for white, which is okay. Rook c8, disregard it. No need to play rook c8. That's like a dead draw, even though technically white is a pawn up. So for the computer program, it would be like slight plus for white. Okay, finally, some changes in Wasiela graph against Krysiuk. Let's go there. We haven't looked at this one for a long while. So h3 played on move 15 caused Krysiuk to think for about 40 minutes. We'll get a camera on Wasiela and Krysiuk very soon, so please try to. Why black didn't bring the other rook into play? We are still talking the previous game, yeah. So what happened in Krysiuk's game? After h3, he ended up playing bishop f5, and this is the move I was, for some reason, didn't look at. But it's perfectly logical. Remember, we figured out, so white's main idea, and at the same time black's main problem, that both knights are subject to nasty double attacks, was bishop d5 and queen c2. And I even came to the conclusion that black, if, say, nothing tactically works, can go back to d7 guarding one of the knights. But Krysiuk says, why would I guard this knight? I want to guard the other knight, the knight on e4, and then knight from c6 will be moved away. Knight to c3, h7, h6, and after bishop d5, knight c3, bc3 happen. For the time being, white is still kind of slightly better organized, right? The bishop on b6 is somewhat out of play. But then if black, and black probably will do this, black plays knight to e7, push the bishop back, then play d5, c6, getting absolutely symmetrical position. Or maybe not play d5, in fact, because now I kind of realize that if you play d5, it might be not a disaster, but it's like white's knight all of a sudden makes a lot of sense on f3 and will be opting for e5 square. It's just like somehow you have to make sure that the bishop on b6 does something. Or, wait a sec, knight e7 is cool, but how about making a nonsense move? So go to f5, which would be a stupid move per se, but c6 followed by d5, and then the knight might find a very nice outpost on c4. So maybe that's not such a terrible idea. And thanks for mentioning that it's like 0-0 in both games. As it looks right now, it will inevitably be a draw in Dubov-Duda game, because this knight b3 line has just happened. So queens are off. The dark square bishops, the opposite colored bishops, obviously, dark square bishop for black and light square bishop for white, plus two pairs of rooks are on the board only. So that's not a lot of material to work with. And over there, yes, a lot of pieces on the board still, but the structure is symmetrical, and in a way, it's really, really hard to either side to make progress, right? How about bishop d7? Bishop is not doing much on f5. Yeah. You might be right about bishop not doing all that much on f5, but why do we need to keep the knight on c6 any longer? So once again, it goes about this knight, which is very often in the Ruy Lopez in the Giocopiano Italian, is really not very nicely placed on c6 because white has this stupid pawn on c3 restricting black knight's options. So in a way, it's I'm playing knight e7 not because I kind of don't see the way to guard the knight on c6. I'm not sure if it needs to be there. And similarly, there is nothing scary going on with this f5 bishop just yet. So I would probably consider going knight e7, even though you might be right that later on we might move the bishop to h7 or d7 in order to clear the path for this knight to go to f5. That could be yet another idea. Okay, and seems we have some argument about my other line. So if black goes to a5, rook to a4, c6, bishop a2. Yeah, but is black really unhappy in this position? Might as well be. Maybe you're right. Yeah, nice rook lift, by the way. Those who suggested it. Rook on a4, yeah. And I tend to dislike this knight a5. Yeah, knight e7. Simple and solid. But then once again, look, computer gives, as we were told already for a few times, computer gives this position as 0-0. The evaluations are completely equal. From human standpoint, does seem to be still the black has to prove something. Yeah, so it's black who has to make sure that his bishop from b6 successfully comes back to, to enter the game. Because white has, in a way, if you like, more harmonious setup. And this 0-0 evaluation, I have a story on this because it is perhaps the worst thing about, say, computer evaluation, that it's so misleading for a lot of people. So you see it gives 0, 0, 0 in many, many lines, and you would think the position is equal. And we had such accident. I was coaching a national team of Turkey in one of the European team championships a few years ago. It was in Reykjavik, Iceland. And one of my players went to play the line, which looked very suspicious from a human perspective. And later on after the game, after being asked, he said, but computer was assessing this one as a draw, or not a draw, but 0-0, so the position's equal. And we started to check with the computer engine. And it turns out, indeed, computer is able to hold, or the engine, the program is able to hold it for his side. He was playing with black. But then it turns out white has like 5 equivalently interesting tries, 5 different moves, and in response to which you have to play strictly only move with black. So while mathematically the position holds, but by no means I would call it an equal position. So that's the problem with, that's the problem with this 0-0 evaluation. So computer knows it will hold it, the stupid thing, the silicon monster. But over the board, if your opponent has a choice of 5 continuations, and you have to either remember or identify at the board how to deal with all those 5 attempts, it doesn't mean that the position is equal. Coming back to this one, after such an emotional speech, I have to say that it does look very drawish to me. So 2 more moves, knight to e7, bishop back to b3. Back to qualification, it seems. Yeah, back to qualification discussions. Yeah, Wesley didn't qualify for the wild card spot. I'm not really sure where would he qualify from. He didn't do all that well in the Grand Prix. Well, he might still have a chance in the Grand Prix, though, because he has won at least 1 match in Moscow. He was in a semi-final in Riga. So Wesley saw potentially, even though it's not very likely mathematically, but potentially, if he wins the last stage of Grand Prix in Jerusalem, he might as well qualify. But then, if you think, how many people want to win this last event? It's like Wesley needs to win it, Maxim might need to win it, there is Mamedyarov, there is Nepomniachtchi, there might be someone else who has a theoretical possibility. So, it's too much, perhaps. (009) instead of 000. Thanks, Lorinda, on updating this one for us. That seems to be a dull equality, though, because the structure is so symmetrical, right? So it's really, really hard to imagine Grishuk misplaying this one. Must be somewhat low on time, Alexander Grishuk, after spending... I'll have to double check on this, but it seemed that he spent roughly 14 minutes after this h3. And let's quickly update with the other game, which is basically no game from this point. Knight b3 is what we have seen. Bishop takes, pawn takes. The other game, it's the game between Duda and Dubov, of course. Rook to b4, bishop c6, rook to b3. Not really sure why would you continue playing this one with opposite colored bishops, even though, I mean, not on this level, but we've seen people misplaying such positions. Let me try to conjure something out of it. So let's say it will have to involve once again one player making stupid moves. But that's why you have me here. I'm responsible for making stupid moves for them. If something like this happens, this all of a sudden turns to be not such a pleasant position to play, because even with opposite-colored bishops, I do suspect it's still a draw. But if something like this happens, so that f7 is constantly targeted, and then you bring the king to f6, white moves the rook along the 7th rank, you still can't activate your own rook from f8. So this would be problematic. And by the same token, so to reach this position, I had to make a couple of silly moves for black. By the same token, black has his own bishop over there, so if it's black who gets to 2nd rank, it will be black all of a sudden who is kind of slightly pushing for a win. But I don't really see it happening over there. Don't really see it happening over there. So might be a draw agreed any time soon in this second game. So we will be concentrating on Grishuk's game as much as possible. After knight e7, bishop b3, that was the idea. I was kind of reluctant to mention c7, c5. So not trying to, to stabilize the structure, to make it like literally symmetrical by playing d6, d5, and then c7, c6. But so c7, c5, targeting the d4 pawn. Not that d4 pawn needs kind of extra protection or something, but yeah, Grishuk says might as well swap one more. And how do you punish black for that? Like d5 in a way, I mean, it is a logical response. You're given an opportunity to try to take some space, so you do try to take some space. But at the same time, it's kind of counterintuitive to block the scope of your own b3 bishop, right? So we would get some sort of a Benoni structure where it's a weird-looking bishop on b6, I agree, but at the same time, black will get some squares for his pieces, knight to g6, potentially to e5, rook e8, so doesn't seem to be all that problematic for black. But this perhaps is the only way to keep the game tense, because if you capture on c5, I'm guessing Grishuk is planning to take with the b6 bishop, just not to leave it cut off from the game on b6, because d takes might be a bit silly. White plays bishop c4, stops the c5 pawn. You're left with the weakness on c5, and you're left with an idiot on b6, which does nothing. So if white ever captures on c5, I suspect it has to be bishop takes and not the pawn takes. Yeah. Can we get clocks on the display? Regrettably not. Yeah, I would of course love to see, well, the clock next to the players' names, but regrettably we don't have such opportunity over there. And those two young lads, I thought they were about to agree a draw, but not really. Not really. It's perhaps, this game of a chicken. So you offered a draw. No, you offered a draw. So once again, since there is one more game tomorrow with Dubov having the white pieces, I believe it's very important. Very important to, to at least to imitate some sort of a pressure. So it's Grishuk thinking, well, that's a nice angle on the camera, so at least we can see the clock in this game, which is far more important. The other game, well, basically it's a draw already, even though it is technically in progress. So 51, almost 52 minutes for Vasiel Graf, and half an hour left for Alexander Grishuk. It's moved 20, it seems. It's moved 20. And meanwhile, yes, as predicted, a draw agreed in the lower bracket semi-final. Jan Krzysztof Duda and Daniil Dubov agree a draw, so we'll have to play the second game tomorrow, where Dubov will have the white pieces. If the second draw, then a tiebreak the day after tomorrow. Same for the other guys. but their game is much more entertaining. And I believe we'll go for a short break. At that point, as far as I understand, we kind of missed the ceremonial first move at the beginning of the round made by Peter Hinz, the corporate communication director of Russian Post in Europe. But we will see a short video about this today's first move. I'll be back right after. We still have one game, and hopefully we still have some possibilities to, well, for an entertainment in the game between MVL and Alexander Grishko.
First move today will be made by Mr. Peter Hinz. He's corporate communication director for Europe in the Russian Post. Good luck.
Welcome, Mr. Peter Hinz, Corporate Communications Director Europe of Russian Post, one of the partners of World Chess. Today, you had the pleasure to open the game of Mr. Duda and Mr. Dubov. Which move did you choose?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. My move was C2, C4, so a classical English open.
Opening, yeah? It seems to be an expert, you know the opening.
Well, I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but I heard about the English opening.
Great. Russian Post is one of the partners, sponsors of World Chess. Have you heard ever of correspondence chess?
Yes, we have. Actually, that's one of the reasons the Russian Post has decided to be a sponsor of this event, because, you know, since the 18th century in Russia, people have been playing chess via the Russian Post. So the chess is transforming, more and more is online and less offline, and the same is with the postal business. So we see each other as very good partners, and that's why we decided to be a partner of this event.
That sounds great, and thank you a lot for coming here to Hamburg to visit this event.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to semi-finals of Grand Prix Hamburg. One game finished. It's a draw for Jan Krzysztof Duda and Daniil Dubov. The other game is still in progress. Maxim Vachier-Lagrave seemingly is getting, well, at least a tad more pleasant position against Alexander Grischuk. So all attention on this remaining game. And while I was on the break, a lot of discussion in the chat, it seems. First of all, yeah, perhaps I thought of this. Maybe the definition was not entirely correct about this upper and lower bracket, because yes, indeed, people say lower bracket for double elimination tournaments, which are typically not used in chess. I've never heard of double elimination tournament in chess. So I do accept that I had to be more careful with wording, but nevertheless, I hope you got my point. So they do well if you look at the players' brackets. Yeah, so those are in the lower part of it. I mean, which doesn't mean double elimination, just in the lower part of the bracket. The other thing is, where is Miro? Someone was asking. Miro was having a sip of coffee. Not what you guys thought. And let's go back to the position there. After bishop b3 and c5. So we've discussed two possible reactions from white, which is d5 and d takes c5. D takes c5 seems to be the most harmless. After d5, there was a suggestion in the chat to try to play c4 to go for simplifications, but I wasn't sure if Black gets back the pawn in this case. Maybe he does, yeah? And then what's supposed to be the move here? Possibly rook f to c8. And then, yeah, if Black gets to take on c3, he has no problem whatsoever. Okay, so we've discussed two possibilities for white. And Maxim Vachier-Lagrave goes with this third one, which is just play a move. If the c pawn has to be traded for d pawn, he wants to do it on his terms. Black captures d4, nevertheless, knight captures on d4, bishop g6, and bishop goes to f4. So now, I suspect for the first time in this game, there might be some threats. There might be some threats, at least, well, some operations like rook captures on e7 followed by knight c6 have to be considered. Grischuk didn't hesitate too much. He has played bishop b6 to c5, which once again makes a lot of sense. The rook's influence from b8 now is felt, right? By the way, there was an option to somewhat simplify the position by capturing on d4, where white can't really take with the queen, the b3 bishop is hanging. But after cd4, it's like very close to equal, but not yet, right? So black still would have to somehow reposition the pieces. So the structure is fairly similar and pretty comfortable for black, but the way he has his pieces arranged is not ideal. I mean, with this structure, like your d6 pawn versus your opponent's d4 pawn, it's a d5 square you're looking for. So if black would have the knight on d5 supported by the e6 bishop, I would dare to claim that even though white has a pair of bishops, black is fine. But being as it is, it's somewhat unpleasant, so you don't want necessarily to trade your bishop on d4. Bishop c5, so opening the rook, guarding just in case the d6 pawn. But still, there might be some ideas for white. If not for this bishop on b3 being hanging, a move like queen g4 could be considered. And then you could feel, in this case, you would feel that a lot of white pieces are gathered around the king side, right? With rook e7 being a potential idea, or jumping with, I don't know, with some bishop h6 sacrifice somewhere. But there is a problem with queen g4, of course, that black captures on d4, then takes the bishop. So perhaps if queen g4 is on white's agenda, he has to prepare it this way or another. And it turns out this bishop on b3 is like really awkward. Bishop a2 keeps the bishop on the a2 g8 diagonal, but shuts down the rook from a1. And it's like not the move you play comfortably. You might end up doing this, but it's like not the move you are happy with. Playing bishop c2 would actually lead to the position which I believe black already would be a favorite after bishop d4. Well, because you can't really take on g6 intermediate, because black is getting a chance to play an intermediate move of his own, capturing the f2 pawn. Is it correct what I'm saying, though? King takes. We take with the knight. Maybe we take with the pawn. Yeah, I mean, this line doesn't work for white. Yeah, black just takes with the pawn, pins the f4 bishop. And after bishop d4, cd4, we actually get the position I was talking about, where white is, well, black is getting a very strong knight on d5, and it's white who has to be, in a way, careful not to end up with the bad bishop against the knight on d5. Well, in this very case, white probably moves the bishop to g3, targets the d6 pawn, and has no problem. But say, if the bishop is on d2, for instance, in this situation, I would already prefer to be black in this position. Okay, so Vshelograf is thinking after bishop c5. Once again, a reminder on the clock situation. Grishuk is down to some 25 minutes, I believe, something like that, which might be, you know, might develop into some sort of a time trouble later on. 23 minutes 40 seconds. Not that Vshelograf has much more than that. He's down to 40 minutes. But yeah, but the situation is such that both sides have to act, and I believe Chad has mentioned this, both sides have to act with great precision. For white, it's the precision is required to keep this minimal initiative he has, while for black, the position is seemingly harmless, but you make one inaccurate move, you end up in a straight up worse position. You make a couple of inaccurate moves and you might just lose. So black has played bishop c5, but let's imagine it's black to move again. I mean, white did something, played bishop f4 to g3 for whatever reason, or h2. What black has to do? The knight is not moving just yet, because of knight c6, it seems. Or maybe after this silly bishop h2, there might be a knight f5 move, because knight c6, you know, some queen b6 happening, attacking f2. And maybe that's the idea for black then. With bishop on f4, it's, once again, I mean, how do we make it happen so that black is to move? Let's waste the tempo. I mean, those moves, they don't make sense. So just imagine the same position as in the game, just to identify what black wants. Can black, if he's given a move, play knight to f5? Because this doesn't seem to work for white. Bishop f2 at once might be an idea as well. Or just queen b6. So that when you take, black captures back. And it's important to take on b8, I believe, because if you capture f2, king goes, you take on e1, white gets to play an intermediate knight d7. But first, you just recapture on b8, take the knight, and then seemingly both the bishop on b3 and the pawn on f2 are hanging. It's quite messy, this one, anyway, because of rook b1. So let's not discuss this position, which can't even happen, because I had to lose a tempo for white to reach it. And the move was played, the move bishop b3 to a4. For some reason I thought white had to keep the bishop on a2 g8 diagonal, but in fact after seeing this one on the board, you do get the feeling that that's a strong move because it stops rook e8. As long as rook e8 is not possible, the knight is somewhat hanging in the air on e7. So it's awkward to have this knight on e7. And if you move the knight, guess what? It'll be knight c6. That's a curious line, of course. Let's imagine black plays knight f5. Any other alternatives for white apart from knight c6? Not really, right? If you trade on f5, not much left. So you kind of have to go for it. And then the question is, how does black reply? There is queen b6, there is queen h4. There might even be something connected with bishop f2. Or it's too much. Well, perhaps this one's too much. I thought bishop f2 followed by queen h4 to force an ugly looking g3, and there is also rook coming from the other side. Let's say check on b2, but doesn't seem to work. I mean, it sort of works in case of king g1, queen h3. At least to a human eye, I don't really see a defense after that. But there is rook e2. And after queen h3, rook b2. I mean, I would still continue calculating this for black, but it's hard to believe it's going to work. It's hard to believe it's going to work. So not bishop f2 in this case, but there are other options, as we said. Queen h4, for instance, targeting f2. As well as the bishop, where now knight b8 is probably just bad for white because of queen f2 check. I don't know why I'm taking with the queen and not with the bishop. It's just that I'm sure this one works, yeah? Check, you have to go to h1 so that the bishop is gone without a check, but it's still gone and black is winning. The knight on b8 hanging, and more importantly, there is a threat of checkmate in 3. This being checkmate in 3. Knight g3, knight f1 double check, and then queen h2 checkmate. So it does look that knight f5 is a possible move. That's what Khrushchev is calculating, I suppose. Anything else white can do? I mean, technically you can play more or less any move. Say, move the any but which one? That's a stupid position. Point being, I wanted to say you can play any queen move, but it turns out that the only move that actually makes sense with the queen, which would be queen d2, keeping the knight on d4 protected, runs into knight takes and bishop b4, where black wins in exchange. So maybe as surprising as it looks, with white similarly having all the liberty of playing a move he likes, he doesn't have anything better than to trade on f5 himself. In which case, it's very likely that the game will be agreed a draw. Maybe not immediately, but if those knights are gone, it's kind of takes a lot of complexity from the position. I mean, first of all, black solves the issue of his worst piece, which was the knight on e7. Yeah, no more knight c6 double attack threats. And in a way, why on earth black is worse in this position? I mean, being able to look for an active continuations with rook b2, with queen h4, or just queen f6, black similarly has no worries whatsoever, if the knights are traded, that is. So it's really a serious question. If knight f5 is possible, or there is some hidden refutation to that one, which once again can be only knight c6, it seems. But I can't make it work after queen h4. Once again, bear in mind that g3 is not a move. Knight takes g3, bishop g3, queen g3, the f2 pawn is pinned. So there is no such thing as g3 there. Perhaps has to be played. Okay, sorry chat, I've missed the whole discussion, yeah? Knight d5 is better for black, you say? I completely missed the discussion, sorry guys. What do you think of the line? Knight to d5, and then in case of knight c6 there is queen h4, right? So knight d5 was the idea, and I suspect that's a computer line once again. Knight d5 if queen f3. I would be happy with knight f4 already, or bishop d4, knight f4. But you guys say queen f6, queen to d5, queen to f4. Once again, as long as this knight on d4 is alive, white should be holding. But yeah, now once again, sorry for missing the whole discussion, but after this bishop a4, Khrushchev has played rook b2. Simply eliminating this motif of knight c6. The rook is no longer on b8. And then he'll have a choice between knight d5, knight f5, or possibly other move. So what you guys were discussing, yeah, knight d5, idea of playing queen g4 for white. That's instead of bishop a4, yeah. Bishop c4 perhaps was an alternative. Yeah, that's once again. I thought the chat was not updating, guys. I thought I was in a way surprised that there were no messages coming. So, if we go one move back, which is after bishop c5. Yeah, once again, let me update on this one. After bishop c5, bishop a4. Bishop c4 looked like a viable option as well. Yeah, I looked at bishop c2, right? Bishop c4 looked like a decent option. In this case, maybe he wasn't happy with black putting a queen on c7, let's say, and black having some ideas, let's say, connected with this bishop on c4 being hanging. This I don't know, but yeah. Does look like bishop c4 would have made sense as well. Is it like a real question? So when grandmasters ponder over the board, do they see the lines about the same time as on the analysis board, or do they take longer? What I mean, it's like the fact that I'm moving the pieces, or they analyze basically blindfold without touching the piece. I don't think it matters at least for this kind of players. I don't think if you would let them move the pieces, it would actually increase their chances of finding or not finding some particular lines. Maybe in some specific positions where you really have to calculate a long line, like say you go 10 moves deep, some forced line, and after 10 moves you still have to find one more precise move. Maybe in this kind of calculation you'd be in a bit of a trouble. But other than that, I don't really think it varies from me moving the piece around on the digital board. So after rook b2, chat suggests queen c1. Or queen f3. Oh, well, queen f3 played, you mean? Yeah. Queen f3 played. Which seemingly allows knight f5, right? And queen c1, people were claiming that queen c1 is kind of would kind of force black to go back. I'm wondering if it was his plan to go back, because could it be that knight d5 would still work here? At least, I mean, it's a bit of a fantasy, of course, but at least if white captures on b2 and black on f4, I can imagine this being, you know, threatening for white with queen g5 to come or queen h4. Knight d3 threatening to win the exchange back. That might be the move, of course. I mean, once again, it's like, in terms of ideas, this seems attractive, but there might be a move after which white is just like safely better. Perhaps, yeah. That's perhaps a bit too much. But then, I'm really wondering, yeah, you're right, that is a fair point. I mean, if it's... I suspect he was considering knight d5, because otherwise what do you do? It's like, it's not that queen on c1 is so terribly placed, so it doesn't really make sense to consider like going back on the b file. Aha, so you guys say that over there after rook e3, white would have been safe. Yeah, having rook g3. Could be. Could be. And the engine suggests queen b7. Fair enough, yeah. Perhaps reaching f3 in like not the most usual way, yeah? Queen b7 and... oh, wait. Queen b7 and then to f3. Maybe that's overly optimistic, but we will not know, because now queen f3 was played. Khrushchev is thinking he's perhaps below 20 minutes by that point. Yeah, that's an awkward question to ask. What's the clock situation? 14 minutes, I was told. Yeah. You can see it yourself, 36 minutes for Maxim Vachier-Graf, and yeah, Khrushchev's clock, well, so he'll play in this very soon. He will end up playing on like 1 minute per move, plus those 30 seconds of increment. Now, the question is, so no more knight d5, that's uncertain. Can he... wanted to ask if he can play knight f5. He decided to capture on d4 this very moment. C takes, I suspect. But then this one is not equal. I mean, it's like he leaves his opponents with a pair of bishops. So takes knight f5, perhaps that's his point. What was the drawback of knight f5 at once after queen f3? That I'm kind of curious to know, because I'm not sure white can take. Not sure white can take because of rook f2, right? And then there is no moment that you can give an intermediate check on e7. So that's my point. It's like, if it's done other way around, that there could be some intermediate check on e7, but after rook f2, knight e7 is answered with queen e7. Rook takes, then it's a check on f3, they discover check from the bishop on c5, and then the f4 bishop is gone as well. So knight d4 would more or less force the trade of knights, where black would keep the bishop. Ah, well, bishop c1. Thanks a lot. Should have seen this one. Yeah, thanks very much, but should have seen this one really. Yeah, attack the rook, attack the knight. And black can't keep the rook on the second ring. Yeah, if the solution would be that simple, yes, Vachier-Graf would not have gone for this. So black trades on d4, goes knight f5, Isn't it somewhat awkward for black? I don't like this sequence of rook b2 and then having to trade on d4. d5 was best before knight f5. What do I mean d5? To play over here, to play d5 for black. Could believe this one being best, but it's kind of not very pleasant position to be in. Or are you kidding me? d5, queen a3, attacking both guys, the rook and the knight. Nah, probably that's... d5 that doesn't really work, yeah? Okay. So bishop takes, pawn takes, knight to f5. What to do for white? Perhaps I have to mention that if those d-pawns somehow magically disappear, it's still not yet a draw in this case, with a lot of pieces and white having a pair of bishops, because black might find it awkward, especially the rook on, the rook on f8. I say if I go queen a3, for instance, and then the rook is attacked, right? And if rook b8 perhaps being a terrible mistake, then already some problems might occur. Because bishop d6 would, attack both rooks if the knight is pushed away somehow. g4 doesn't work just yet because knight takes, and in case of bishop d6 there is knight f3 check, but we are not far away from this one. Yeah, could be that rook b7 or rook b6 is more precise in this case. But yeah, but not fully equal, it seems. And d5, the comment about d5 was about the position over here, where he didn't trade on d4 just yet. So as we figured out, knight f5 was a bad move because of bishop c1, but d5 seemingly would hold the game. (24 d5). Yeah, thanks for figuring this one out. But before that, it was mentioned just d5 before knight f5, and I thought you were referring to this position, where white seemingly is winning with queen a3. Yeah, but d5 here. Why would you need d5 here at first place? To put the bishop on e4, knight on g6. Maybe that's the idea. Okay, let's see. Now that's the current position. 25 moves into the game, and was Yellowgrove thinking? Because I believe he does feel that that's the a glimpse of opportunity. The game which started, I won't say so, but it didn't look any kind of advantage for white, just a few moves back, right? We are on move 25 now, precisely. Black's queen position is problematic. I mean, Black's position is problematic, not only his queen's position. Yeah, trading the queens also doesn't mean full equality. I'm not even sure what Black has to do. I mean, he has to keep playing moves without blundering major things, yeah, and try to simplify somehow. But where exactly the queen goes, for instance, does it have to be like queen f6 or something? Could you trap the rook with bishop b3? Ah, well, no, not really. d4 is hanging, right? d4 is hanging, so bishop b3, not yet. It's like you have to guard d4 for that, but Black will not be just waiting for you to trap the rook, right? Bishops are doing great, particularly if somehow we will be able to answer knight d4 with bishop d6. which I don't see how to do. Queen c3, yeah. Queen c3, queen a3 I was looking at. Queen c3 might be the move as well. Attack the rook, guard your d4 pawn. Then perhaps the question will be if black can allow himself to play queen b6, seemingly attacking the pawn. And as well, guarding the rook on b2. The move Maxim Vachier-Graf played, not quite sure why and what for it is played. Bishop f4 to e3. Is it an attempt to be rock solid? That's a little bit weird, to be honest. Wait a sec. What the solution? I don't get the question. What the solution after queen c3, or? Not sure. Queen c3 and then bishop d1. Not sure why would you want to move the bishop to d1. Like queen c3, black would probably play queen b6, yeah, and then it could be that you still have some difficulties guarding d4. I'm wondering what was the right way. And was there a right way at first place? Because the move he ended up playing allows black, at the very least, to trade on e3. Now people say queen h4 is slightly better for black. I mean, how slightly? It's once again, I mean, queen h4, and imagine white says pass, and you capture everything on d4. Could be that you're... Yeah, I wanted to claim that even then your d6 pawn is too weak to claim any sort of an advantage, but maybe not. Maybe you do have a chance. Yeah, but being in Krzysztof's shoes, I believe you just capture the e3 bishop, make sure that you have the equality, and don't overpush it. Because that's typically that's the mood before the game with the black pieces, especially if it's start of the match, right? So game one with the black pieces, you don't necessarily want to take additional risks, so you probably just take on e3. People keep suggesting moves, I believe, instead of knight takes d4. Queen g4. In order to have bishop h6 in case of knight takes d4. This is something I was thinking about, but I'm guessing black is not necessarily against playing h6, h5. Could be that black can play h5, push the queen away. And then you might end up playing queen back to d1 in order to guard this pawn, yeah? So something not very pleasant. And there was the other suggestion, which was queen d5, and in this case, there was once again something that I didn't like. Like queen h4, for instance, attacking the bishop and the pawn on f2. h3, queen, g3, queen h3 being extremely awkward, right? Yeah, but he has taken on e3, as I said. That's... Once again, I don't care if engine gives like queen h4 or some move which is seemingly better, but the explanation is very simple. Few moves back, it was clear Krzysztof was a little bit uncomfortable. White's position looked somewhat, somewhat more pleasant, and it's very hard to change the attitude, unless it's something big. Yes, if Maxim Vachier-Graf would blunder a rook, then Krzysztof would have gone for it. But being as it is, and who knows if queen h4 is better or not, I know this kind of a mindset when you're fighting for equality. If you're looking like, okay, I want this and that, I want to equalize, then at kind of a couple moves back, you're dreaming of, oh, I wish I could exchange one of his bishops, so he won't have a pair of bishops advantage. And then you are presented this opportunity. So it's kind of, after bishop e3, the only thing you are thinking about typically is that what bad can happen if I take on e3? If the answer is no, like nothing bad can happen, then you just snap grab it on e3 and so be it. Okay, so knight takes e3. And then once again, it's somewhat, there's no mystery there. Wanted to say it's somewhat mysterious why Maxim Shelograf is thinking. It was him to play bishop e3, so he must have prepared the answer to knight e3, and turns out that the answer was queen e3 along with the draw offer. YouTube chat, I'm reading you to answer already, not for the first time, the question, which chat is he reading? This chat on YouTube. So it turns out a draw was agreed after the exchange on e3, and players, of course, will discuss. There is a feeling that there were misses from both players. I'm really curious about this moment where knight d5, where chat was suggesting knight d5 would have given some advantage to black, because I really wonder if Grishuk was, kind of didn't consider this one at all, or for some reason decided not to go for it. So, really a shorter day in the office today, and you can see players are visibly happy with the outcome of the game. Maxim Shelograf smiling. No big thing happened. Indeed, tomorrow will be the other game where both players might be optimistic about tomorrow's game. For Krishuk, it will be a game with the white pieces. For Maxim Shelograf, it will be the game with the black pieces. That's black pieces which brought him the win and the qualification to the final in Riga in his match against Alexander Grishuk. So no surprises today. Two, won't say quick, but relatively quick draws. But that's the bliss of the knockout format. So if two draws happen to be tomorrow, that it means the day after tomorrow, we will see a tiebreak, and typically those tiebreaks are really, really exciting. So thanks for tuning in today. Make sure to come back tomorrow for the second game of the semi-finals of Hamburg Grand Prix. I'm signing off for today. We do have a recorded interview with Dubov and Duda after today's game, and tomorrow it will be 3 p.m. Hamburg time, same place, same time, so make sure to join.
Welcome, Mr. Duda. Welcome, Mr. Dubov. Your first game of the semi-final ended in a draw. Mr. Duda, you discussed a line today which Dubov used this year several times against higher ranked opponents. What did you hope for when you entered this line?
Actually hope this line wouldn't occur, to be honest, but well, I expected something else, to be honest. But of course, Daniel played like this against Hikaru and Mamedyarov, I think also. Yeah, possibly I should have checked this more complicated stuff like Nakamura played. Yeah, okay, I hope that I would squeeze my opponent somehow, but okay, timely d4, just making inevitable every exchanges, and yeah, it was possibly too easy draw for my opponent, but okay, what to do? I played c4 because I hope that perhaps okay, everyone is blundering after c4, so why not to try this again? Yeah.
Mr. Dubov, easy day in the office?
I don't know. Well, no, I mean, it's just a normal day. Well, first of all, there was a moment after queen takes f6 there was a moment white could could try knight takes d5, because I thought myself like an idiot. Basically, I've spent like, I don't know, maybe 30, maybe more minutes to play h6. I mean, obviously, the only thing I was worried about was takes, and knight takes d5. And then I played it, and Krzysztof played takes, rook c1 instantly, and I realized I've just burned like 30 minutes for nothing. But after knight takes d5, there was a brilliant line. I don't know, I actually failed to find the controversy or something. I mean, if you would have a board, I would show you. So basically, queen takes f6, knight takes d5, c takes d5, queen takes d5. Now both we thought bishop takes f2 check, rook takes f2, queen takes b2. Now after some rook a to f1, I have bishop e6 and black is fine, but there's rook takes f7 instead. Now queen takes a1 check is met by rook f1 check as well, so I don't know, I have to take on f7 probably, and then white plays rook f1, and here's a rook down, but yeah, both black rooks are hanging. And I don't know, I mean, I didn't say way to, let's say, to equalize, because I don't know, I have like few positions with where I'm a pawn down, but I mean, it's not complete equality. Yeah, I thought maybe after rook takes f7, I should start with queen b6 check, king h1, bishop e6, takes, and now some move, I don't know, bishop, queen d2 or something. So that basically shows that even such a, you know, short draw makes some sense for the players. I mean, there were some things to think of. Yeah, and in the game I thought I'm just completely fine. I don't actually think that d4 is the only way. I mean, it's just very, very straightforward, but I think even in general black is fine. So yeah, I mean, sort of funny is that I've played this line like probably 6 times, and at least 3 times out of 6, Krzysztof was like 10 meters away from me. Yeah, actually I played it in Moscow, I played it in Paris, I played it in Riga, I played it everywhere. But yeah, sometimes it happens. I mean, I've just failed to prepare properly for Swiller's Grunfeld. So I mean, I know those feelings. The guy plays this like in, I don't know, 12th time, and still you're sort of surprised. Yeah, it happened. So yeah, I mean, okay, it's a normal game.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Duda, maybe he mentioned a very long forced line. Did you also calculate this line, or was it not in your mind?
I forgot about rook f1 actually. And Daniel told me after the game about this possibility. I'm not sure. I mean, okay, I also don't see at the moment the way for black to play, but still it's very complicated. You have to give up the rook just to win a pawn, possibly, and if there is hole, you are basically losing. Yeah, so yeah, of course I should have suspected something when Daniel fought so long, but yeah, as said, I forgot rook f1. This variation Daniel said, and okay, yeah, so possibly it was working.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot for your comments.